that would be helpful. We'll be getting started here in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Fold it from my Outlook, so make sure it.
Hey Kay, this is Karen. I've got 2 o'clock. Do we want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And then it appears that someone's got control of the PowerPoint, so which is perfectly fine. Is that somebody on my team?
I don't think so.
That work? Okay. All right. Bye.
Okay, let me go back and pull it up again.
Now it looks like you're in control.
Okay, good deal. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I know people are still coming in, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Good afternoon. My name is Karen Worth. I'm with the Kentucky Department of Education. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for another edition of EANS and the steps that we all are going to take to try to make this a smooth and beneficial process for you guys. I appreciate you all being with us here today. There's going to be several on our team that are going to talk with you today about processes that are going to occur after you have received your approved budget. I know that is the process that you all are going through right now with your identified KDE consultant. So once your budget amendments are submitted and approved, you'll be ready to go. And these slides hopefully will give you the direction that you need in the different steps, whether it be a reimbursement or whether it be would be for procurement of services. So let's get started. First slide you've seen before. This is just a really broad overview of the EANS program. It was part of the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funding, or the GEAR funding, and it provides services and reimbursements to non-public schools that were impacted by COVID-19. We did receive in the first round of EANS approximately $40 million. And you all have already gone through the process of filling out your application. I know that Matthew Courtney and David Malonti here at the department have had constant conversations with each of you, as well as our KDE consultants on your applications and how much your allocation would be. That information was posted, your assistance information was posted last week, I believe, so that you do have your dollar amount that you're familiar with and that you're working towards on your budget amendment. So it looks like somebody else took control of the presentation. So if I need to stop share, okay. So let me share again. Sorry about that, guys. I am not the most tech savvy person, so I appreciate you all being patient with me. Let's see if we can get it pulled back up. And then lastly, I just want to say, as the slides are coming back up, that there was original conversation around the per pupil amount, and that dollar amount after all of the applications were received did change. And as you all know, now it is $1,050 for each student enrolled, or a per pupil allowance, and $525 for your low income students. For today on our agenda, we're going to talk about quite a few things, and this is being recorded, so you'll be able to reference it again. We're going to talk about our request management process, what you will need to submit for reimbursement for past and future expenditures, what you would need for KDE to make a purchase for you or to procure services. Timelines, after your budget amendment is approved and you start these processes, what kind of timelines you can look at for getting a reimbursement or receiving the service that you've asked for. Physical inventory and fixed assets. As you know, a stipulation of the GEAR and the EANS money is that KDE take title to fixed assets. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Public control of funds and the responsibilities that will fall to the non-public school, and then we'll take questions. As we typically do in these webinars, if you could put your questions in the chat box. Thelma Hawkins on our team here will be monitoring that, and we'll get those questions answered after we get through the slides. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Kay Kennedy. She is our project manager for this pot of money, and she is going to share with us a little bit about the process that we've been using. So, Kay.
Thank you, Karen. Again, welcome everyone. Hopefully this slide will give you sort of a graphical overview of the process. I know sometimes if you are not used to dealing with state government or large governmental entities, it can be a little maybe intimidating or daunting about how you weave your way through all of the bureaucracy and paperwork, and hopefully we'll lay it out here for you this afternoon that will make sense to you, and you'll feel a little more comfortable about managing the process. So if we follow along the graphic, if you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, the non-public school entity is shown in the graphic, and that's you guys. So what are you going to do? You're going to generate a request via forms that we will have available on our website. We'll get to that in just a little bit on our presentation. But you're going to email that form to one of two mailboxes here at KDE, depending upon whether it's a reimbursement request that you're making or whether you're looking for KDE to make a procurement on your behalf. So the first thing is to distinguish between what type of request you're making, and then mail it to the right mailbox. Then, if you'll notice the arrows coming out of those two mailboxes, to go to that nice pink bubble there on the right, that's where the magic fairy dust and the unicorns are hidden that will process your request and make it all happen. That's where we make the sausage, so to speak. So once the request comes to KDE, we've got a consultant who is going to be looking at your request in comparison to the budget, the amended budget that you have submitted, and validating that your request is in line with what you've presented to us in your approved amended budget. And then based on that approval of your request, it will be forwarded to another department within KDE who actually processes the financial end of that request. And it will either be in the form of a request to EMARS to issue funds to you directly in terms of a reimbursement, or in terms of a procurement, it would be a delivery order to a vendor who then is going to direct ship to you as the recipient. And you can acknowledge receipt of that and then become a part of the process for us to get that paid. So it's really quite a straightforward process. One piece of advice that I would give is just to retain your paperwork, start a folder, start a box, start something to keep track of your paperwork, and we'll get through this. It's a great opportunity for you guys to take advantage of this funding, and hopefully within our processes we'll make it as smooth as possible and as easy as possible for you to get through and to get either the reimbursements or the procurements done. So that's just a little graphic picture. We'll now dive into the details. Karen, back to you.
Thank you, Kay. I'm going to turn it over now to Alan Coldiron. He's our procurement branch manager here at the department, and he's going to walk you through the reimbursement and the procurement process. Alan?
Thank you, Karen. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to walk you through our reimbursement request form and our purchase procurement request form. So on this slide, you're going to see kind of a step-by-step instructions on how to fill these forms out, the type of information that we are going to need for this. So we're going to need school name, the date that you're requesting, and this is for reimbursement that we're talking about here. The requester name, your email address, your phone number, your Kentucky vendor number that you've all went through the process to get to be set up for, your mailing address, city, state, zip, and if the person that's going to be responsible for the state-owned items, as we're calling them, a custodian, if they are different than the person requesting the reimbursement, then those names of that person or persons needs to be listed. You're going to need a list of the receipt dates that you're requesting reimbursement for, and then you're also going to need to select the type of reimbursement request that you're going to do, that you are requesting. And that'll be in a drop-down box once we get to the actual screen that has the form on it. I'll show you that. You're going to enter the description of the items that you're requesting reimbursement for, the quantity, the unit price, and then the amount. This is going to be in an Excel spreadsheet. The amounts are formulated for you. So as soon as you put in the quantity and the unit price, it will automatically do the calculations of the totaling for you. If you need to add additional rows, you can do that. You just have to remember to fill the formulas down. Now, next slide, please, Karen. All right, so this is the top of the reimbursement request form. You know, your school name, your requester name, your request date, phone, email, Kentucky vendor number, mailing address, and the custodian, again, if it is different than the person doing the requesting. And again, it's got directions there that once you fill this out completely, you will email it back to the email address listed there. All right, next slide.
The slides don't seem to be updating. Oh, there we go.
All right, so this is the bottom half of the form. So this is where you are going to list the items that you are seeking reimbursement for. You'll list your receipt date, and again, the reimbursement category will be the one of the 13 allowable categories that we have, and that will be a drop-down box that you can select which one you are requesting. The department object you won't have to worry about. That will be something that KDE will put in for you. You will use the description, put in a description of the items that you're seeking reimbursement for, your quantity and unit price, and then the amount and the total box down at the bottom are all formulas, so they'll do the addition for you. On this, when you'll see the instructions there that you need to attach receipts and circle the date and amount on each receipt. So when you submit this to the email box, you need to have the attachments, all the receipts in that email as well. Next slide, please. All right, now this is going to procurement requests. It's going to be very, very similar to the reimbursement request. So this is the instructions page that you'll see on the Excel spreadsheet. Again, school name, request date, requester name, email address, phone number, Kentucky vendor code number, mailing address, city, state, zip. If the custodian person is different than the person requesting, you'll want to list those person or persons' names. Receipt dates you won't worry about. You will select the correct purchasing category. Again, it's a drop-down box. You'll enter a description of the items. You'll enter part numbers if it's applicable. You'll enter the quantity and the unit price. And again, the total and amount columns are all formulated for you already, so they'll do the addition for you. And if you need to add additional rows, you can do so. Just remember to fill the formulas down when you do that. Next slide, please. All right, so this again is the top half of the purchase request form. You'll fill all this information out, the requester name, request date, school name, phone, email, Kentucky vendor number, mailing address, city, state, and zip. And if the custodian is different than the person requesting, then you will list that person or persons' names. Now you'll notice that the email box is different for procurement than it is for reimbursements, but you will submit whichever type of request it is, whether it's reimbursement or procurement, to its own email box. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this is where you're kind of filling out the information of what you're wanting us to procure. All right, so the purchasing category, again, is a drop-down box, so you'll fill out, select which one is applicable. Part number, if you have it. Description. Department object, you will not worry about. That's something KDE will do. Quantity, unit price, and then the amount and total boxes are already formulated for you. In the instructions, you'll see that if this is a service being requested, please indicate estimated service dates. Okay, when you would like the service to start and when you would like the service to end. Also include requested delivery dates if requesting a commodity. Now remember, this is just requesting. None of these can be guaranteed depending on supplier availability, if anything is on back order or anything like that. We can't guarantee delivery dates or service dates, but we'd like to know about when you want them. If you have gotten any quotes for the items that you're requesting, please include those in your email when you send this to the email box. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is kind of the timelines on the approval. Reimbursements can be up to 30 days. Remember, the last date to seek reimbursement is October 30th of 2023. And procurements will depend on the service or commodity and availability on MA. The last date to submit your procurement requests is October 30th of 2022. And the reason for that is depending on what type of service or commodity you are requesting and what type of procurement process that we have to follow to get those items for you, it can take some time. If it's something very high-tech, IT related, some procurements like that can take 6 months, 9 months, even a year. So that's why we have given a year time frame before the end, a year difference between the last date of procurement request and the last date of reimbursement request. So just some examples, some staffing, technology, some of that could be on MA or a master agreement, or could be done through a different type of contract called an MOA, a memorandum of agreement. But if it has to go through a solicitation or bid process, then the time frame is pushed out quite greatly. Minimum process on a competitive bid is you're looking 4 to 5 months. It could be longer depending on if it's IT related or not. All right. I believe that is my last slide. Yes.
Thank you, Alan. So I'm going to turn it over now to Larry Mays. He is our inventory guru here at the department, and he's going to talk a little bit about inventory. Larry?
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. A physical inventory and fixed assets portion of this, there's going to be a physical inventory every year for these assets. An asset is, the definition of that is intended for internal use. It's not for resale. It has a useful life extending beyond and at least the fiscal year in which it was acquired, and also has a monetary value. Also, there will be an asset custodian for your location. This is going to be the person responsible for assets received and will be assigned a custodian code for identification in the state inventory system. This person will conduct the annual physical inventory observation and will be the contact point for your school. The annual inventory report will be provided by the Kentucky Department of Education every year, and this inventory will need to be completed within the time frame outlined in the fiscal year. Next slide, please, Karen. All right, and what you're seeing here is what's called our EANS Equipment Assignment Record and Receipt Form. This is the form that your school will receive once the items have been purchased. You will receive this form as well as property tags for each item that is considered an asset. Once you receive this paperwork and these tags, you will assign a tag to each item, and then the serial number, model number, and description to coincide with that tag number, and you will return that back to us. And this will then enter your item into the inventory for us to produce your report yearly. All right, I think that's my last slide, Karen.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, Nicole Vanover, she's going to talk to you a little bit about the fixed asset piece of it. Nicole?
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to talk a few minutes about what is meant by the public control of funds. To maintain control of EANS funds, the state educational agency, which is KDE, must maintain records of equipment and supplies it has provided. So if we procure these items, we are going to have that documentation. But if we reimburse you for it, then you will have that documentation, and you should maintain that for, I'll go over that the next slide, it's for 3 years. Any items tagged are subject to inspection if deemed necessary. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the responsibilities of the non-public schools, and this is regarding inventory. As a recipient, you should notify KDE of any changes to the custodian or other contact information. Second, in the event that items are lost, stolen, or destroyed, you must notify KDE. And then third is the receipts and documentation for the reimbursable items must be maintained for 3 years, and best practice is 5. Next slide, please. And the last thing I'm going to go over is just, I'm going to show you, this is the EANS inventory acknowledgement form. So you will be required to complete this form and return to KDE if you have received fixed assets. Now, this form covers your responsibilities that we've discussed throughout the presentation, such as receipt of goods, the custodian responsibilities, tagging items, how to handle lost, stolen, or damaged items, and the retention record requirements. Now, you'll see 2 signature lines on this form. One is for the requester and one is for the custodian. This may end up being the same person, and if that's the case, that's okay. You can sign in both lines or leave one blank, either or. But just to clarify, and I think we've already said this, but I'll say it again, the requester is the person who initiated the process. They submitted the application, budget request, and so forth. The custodian is the person who's going to tag items, conduct the physical inventory, and they'll be completing that EANS equipment assignment record form that you saw previously. And I think that's all for me, Karen.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, that completes our short presentation today. So I know that we have several questions in the chat box. So
Yes.
Thelma, do you want to start our questions off?
Yes. So
Thank
the
you.
first question is, do we need new quotes from vendors? I had a quote for getting 10 iPads, and with the new budget, I can afford 20. Do we just trust the number we give for the budget?
Alan, do you want to take that one?
So as far as your budget is concerned, we can't really go off the pricing that you get because a lot of these items will be on state contract with different pricing. In that case, you can send quotes. That's fine. And if you already have a quote that's maybe expired, that's fine as well. More on that type of thing especially on iPads, for example. I just need to know what model number that you want, and your quote would have that. The pricing, well, on your quote is not the pricing that we're going to use as far as what we're going to purchase for you.
So Alan, would we be safe to say, though, that those types of discrepancies will be communicated back to the non-public school so that they'll know, you know, if their quote says $5,000 and it's going to come in through our master agreement at 3,000, we need to make sure that we're communicating that back to the non-public, right?
That's correct, because
Okay.
then it opens up to where they could purchase more with the same money.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Does a new purchase require a vendor of the state?
It could. I would honestly say that if that the only case on that is if we were trying to purchase from a vendor that we have never purchased from before. If that's the case, we would probably be going through some kind of competitive solicitation to do that, and they would go through all that process to become a vendor with the state at that time.
Okay. So Nicole addressed this question, but if she wasn't clear, you can add additional comments in the chat. And the question is, if the custodian is the same as the requester, is it left blank? Yes. Okay, next question. If we are getting something new, can we order it and then submit for reimbursement, or do we have to do the procurement? Is David or Matthew on? I think it depends on if it was budgeted, if it was allowed for reimbursement, because which category it was in, because there were some items that were not allowed for reimbursement.
Can you repeat that one, Thelma? See if I can help fill in.
Okay. If we are getting something new, can we order it and then submit for reimbursement, or do we have to do the procurement?
Yeah, it depends on whether or not it was one of those items that was allowable for reimbursement. I think that's probably the key to look at first.
Okay. Can we purchase tech such as Chromebooks over the summer and file as a reimbursement?
Again, Thelma, I think that falls into if technology is a reimbursement allowable commodity, then yes, they could.
Right. Okay. Some purchases like furniture has no model number on them. What do we do with that?
I think in that case, it's probably not going to be very common. We're probably going to leave that portion blank and then probably ask for a better description of the item, just to kind of make up for the fact it may not have a model number or serial number.
Okay. What is the dollar threshold for needing to tag an assessment? Example, do we have to tag all items over $500, $1,000, etc.?
All items over $500 will be tagged, and that will also include technology items, regardless of their price, such as iPads, Chromebooks, and things of that nature, regardless of their value.
Okay. If we receive devices that are under warranty and something gets broken, who will take care of replacing or repairing the device?
I'm sorry, Thelma, can you repeat that one? I'm sorry.
If we receive devices that are under warranty and something gets broken, who will take care of replacing or repairing the device?
That would fall, since that is a item that is owned by the state, then it would be our responsibility to do that.
Okay. When completing the application, we requested a vendor number. Where do we get that assigned number? Your number should be on your notice of assistance, which is posted on the website. It's a PDF file, and you sort through the file to find your school name, and that there's a section that states vendor number. So it should be on that notice of assistance. There were maybe about 5 to 10 that did not have vendor numbers, but we'll be reposting that because all of those numbers have been assigned. Will the slides be available for us to print? The PowerPoint will be posted to the EANS website sometimes later today and definitely by tomorrow morning. Okay. When our updated budget is approved, may we purchase the items or services and submit reimbursement requests?
Again, I think that hits
Yes.
the depending on what those items and services are and if they fall in the category of reimbursable or not.
Right. Okay. Can we use our own vendor Can we use our own vendors?
So on that, if you are purchasing something that you are going to seek reimbursement for, yes. And it's something that is reimbursable, yes. If you are doing a purchase request, a procurement request through us, then no. We are going to utilize the master agreements that we already have in place with the vendors that we utilize, or we will do a competitive bid process and award based on our criteria.
Okay. How can we find out what was allowed and not allowed on the first application? Your KDE consultant should have already made contact with you, and if not, you need to email Kay Kennedy. An email went out, I think it was either Thursday or Friday, just to find out if your consultant had made contact with you, and if you had not, you need to email Kay Kennedy. But you can request a copy of your application from your KDE consultant.
Hey, Thelma, this is Kay.
Yes.
I'd also like to mention that we are running into a few instances of where the email address that the school provided on the application is not the same as the email address that is on our distribution list. Now, we're trying internally to get that rectified, but I've sent a note to a couple of our KDE consultants to go back and double check the email address on the application to make sure that they've reached out to the correct email address. And again, if you're having trouble and you want to send an email, my email address is k.kennedy2@education.ky.gov, and we'll try to make sure you get hooked up with your consultant.
Okay, thank you, Kay. So the next question is a staffing question. We currently have a Title I teacher that is a part-time KDE employee. Can we use EANS funds to continue to pay this employee over the next couple of years since they are technically already a KDE employee?
I think, David, I was going to let you jump in.
I don't think
Well,
so, but yeah.
That person is probably an employee of the district. So it would potentially be possible to use that same person. Karen, do you have anything else to add about hiring processes for staff?
No, we still are, and once we see, the lift, we'll be able to better address these individual circumstances. There's not going to be a one solution fits all when it comes to staffing. So we are getting lots of questions and they're all very, very different. So unfortunately, we're going to probably have to address them each individually, look to see what the need is, and then what we need to do as the Department of Ed to supply that particular service for the non-public school. So I'm sorry, I don't have definitive answers for specific staffing questions.
I think, Karen, they could keep that person in mind and maybe let us know when it comes time that they have a person in mind, and we could potentially contract with that person.
I think that that is an accurate statement, yes.
Okay. What would cause the need to return items? The phrase take title of keeps getting used. We are needing to buy 50 to 75 new desks for social distancing into new classrooms, along with possible classroom furniture. Would there be a reason you come collect these from us in the future?
Well, technically, Thelma, the answer to that is anything that you are reimbursed for or that we provide through the procurement process becomes property of the department. We've stressed in previous webinars that those things may be used until no longer needed by the program or until they reach the end of their useful lives. But those things do become property, which takes title to means the same thing. They become property of the agency.
So this is Kay. Let me also add a circumstance under which the department may need to take physical control of the asset. Let's say, for example, the non-public school, for whatever reason, decides to shutter its doors forever. So you have some assets that you may want to get rid of in order to dissolve that business. One of the things that you would have to do in dissolving that is to get the state-owned property, the state-owned equipment, whatever KDE has title to, that would have to come back to the state. Your other assets that aren't tagged as state property, you could dispose of as you see fit. But if you need to dispose of anything with a state tag on it, then there's a process to go through. Of course, there's a process to go through so that KDE can retain ownership of that. But certainly, it's not our intention to show up, the day after tomorrow and with a U-Haul and take stuff out of your building. So.
Yes. Okay. If we plan to use EANS funds to hire someone to address learning loss, does that person have to be a KDE employee? If so, how does that hiring process work? And so Karen just addressed that a little bit. We are working through that process, and it's a new process for us, and we're just working through that process right now.
And yes, they would be a KDE employee.
Can I clarify that just a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
I would also add to that they are a KDE contracted employee for the amount of time for which they are providing services. There may be, just like in the previous instance, a person on staff or someone hired through a district to provide Title I services that could provide tutoring, let's say, for example, as long as that time is separate from their contracted private school time or contracts for any other services being provided.
Yes, and just to reiterate, these are all stipulations of the grant. This is not a KDE rule. This is a requirement of being a recipient of the EANS funds.
Okay. To clarify, assets that have been reimbursed do not need to be tagged in inventory, correct?
Larry, do you want to take that?
Yes, actually, those items will still need to be tagged in inventory because that kind of goes back to take title. Once you have been reimbursed for that item, that becomes, property of the Kentucky Department of Education, and those items will need to be tagged as well, based on their being $500 and above or a technology item.
Okay, thanks. What are the guidelines around salaries for those that are hired to address the learning loss?
I don't know that there's a specific guideline. I think that our advice, David or Matthew, has been to kind of base it on the salaries that you currently have in your non-public.
Yeah, that's correct, Karen. We've just for budgeting purposes, since we didn't have anything solid to go on, like a set salary schedule for those particular services, we just asked people to rely on their existing salary and benefit schedules to provide us a number, to start the budgeting process. So same thing goes with quotes for things. If you had a quote, we've asked you to provide that just for budgeting purposes. Again, like has been mentioned previously, though, those costs may differ based on master agreements and things of that nature. So we've just, we had to have a starting point for budgeting purposes, and that's the guidance we've given.
Okay, this is another staffing question. How do we submit for reimbursement if our staff are paid twice a month?
Staff cannot be reimbursed.
Yeah, true. Okay, what are the expectations in terms of wage? Would I have to follow the school's pay scale, or would a separate pay scale be established for guidelines? Does the school have control over the hiring of these staff?
So I think, again, the expectation in terms of wage, just as David has said, to follow, for budgeting purposes, follow the school's pay scale to get an approximate amount. There's not been any conversation of a separate pay scale being established for EANS staff. So I would say no to that. So I would say use what you know as your estimate. And then for the school having control over the hiring of these staff, it really just depends on the hiring mechanism or the way that we are able to obtain this particular service that you're asking for. If it becomes a solicitation for a particular service, say an interventionist, there is a specific process that we follow for solicitation, for receiving of bids against solicitation, for the review and the scoring of that. So I don't know if there would be any level of involvement from the non-public school in that process. So Alan can speak a little bit more to it if I've left out anything, Alan, or said anything incorrectly.
No, you're definitely speaking right, Karen. It would really depend on the mechanism of how we could contract for that individual. So if a non-public had somebody in mind that they wanted for an interventionist, for example, and that person was already on staff within their school district, then we could just do an MOA with their school district and pay the school district directly, who would then turn around and then pay that individual person or employee. But if it's something that we have to do a solicitation and do a bidding process, then it will be very limited, if any, influence that the non-public would have. Basically, we would have to get the bids that we have and review them and pick the best individual, regardless of if who that was, who the non-public wanted or not. And then we would contract, KDE would contract directly with that individual and pay them directly through the EANS funding.
Okay. We were told that new cabling in our school was approved in our first budget. Would that be filed as reimbursement or procurement?
So is this something that's already been done? if it depends. I mean, if it's something that's already been done and it falls under an allowable, that it's allowable under reimbursement, then you would file for reimbursement. If you haven't done it yet and it's allowable for reimbursement, David, am I right to say you can go ahead and do it and then file? But I'm not sure if that particular use is allowable for reimbursement. Do you know right off?
Well, I was just going to say, as long as it falls under one of the allowable reimbursement categories, whether it's being done, whether it's been done or it's a future service that they're going to ask for reimbursement for, as long as it falls under an allowable reimbursement category, it can be, done and then and submitted for reimbursement. I'd direct everybody to go back to the EANS page and the U.S. Department of Education guidance, which they both discuss the allowable reimbursement categories. And again, USAID has provided additional guidance within their non-regulatory guidance document.
Thank you.
Okay. If you request laptops, iPads, technology, who will be responsible for updating and repairing them for the life of the product? Also, once the product has become outdated and no longer operates efficiently, is that the end of the product for use for us?
Larry or Scott, can you all talk on this piece?
I'm not sure, Karen, based as far as the repairing and that goes. I'm not positive on that.
Okay, we can follow up on that one.
Yeah.
Karen, on that one, I would think that for repairing and updating, if there was an update that had to be purchased or repair had to be made, as long as it was still allowable in their budget, then that would be something that we would procure for them. But as far as it becoming unusable, outdated, or whatnot, then we would just have to see what time frame we were looking at as far as EANS.
Okay, thanks, Alan.
Okay. Can we submit tag numbers for assets covered by the EANS funding with our own tags, or will KDE require us to use their tags?
They'll be required to use our tags. We have a specialized sequence of numbers that allows us to identify that these were used for the EANS project. So they would definitely need to use the tags sent by us.
Okay. Will all procurement products be delivered directly to our home, or will we have to travel to pick these up?
So all of the schools have been set up with the addresses that were on their applications. And that is the location that the items will be shipped to.
And this is Kay, and I think the question may refer to a homeschool, and that would be treated no differently, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What is the term that the state considers to be usable life for items? When are they considered past usable life and roll off of the state inventory? Is tech handled the same as other items? Do we dispose of these items or send them back to the state?
Larry or Scott?
We use 3 years for technology items, 5 years for all other items. But however, that does not mean that it will roll off inventory. They will still continue to be on the inventory. This is my first time with doing like a federal grant, so that's something we may have to get back to them with as far as a time frame of when they can be removed from inventory, because I'm not sure on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. On my application, I indicated that I wanted to purchase a network controller. I was told this was an allowable purchase. Once my amended budget application is finalized, can I purchase that and then request reimbursement?
as long as
Yes,
it's allowable.
Yes,
Yeah,
if
as long as
it's,
it falls under an allowable reimbursement category.
okay. Will we need to get approval before we purchase items, for example, Chromebooks, from our vendor just to make sure that you will approve the item for reimbursement?
My suggestion, Thelma, would be yes on that. Doing otherwise creates some risk that
Mhm.
things may not be reimbursed or may not be eligible for reimbursement. So I would wait for confirmation on an approved budget.
Correct. Okay. What information do you need on staff for reimbursement?
I think
So
we've addressed this one a couple times. Staff cannot be reimbursed.
reimburse.
Yeah, that was one of the highlighted updates in US Ed's non-regulatory guidance. I think that occurred after our initial webinars, but they have specifically said that staff cannot be reimbursed, that it must be hiring and on contract with the state.
Okay. May we choose to go the reimbursement route with staffing instead of the staff member being employed by KDE? And I think that goes along with what you just said.
Correct.
hmm Okay. If we have a person in mind that is not a current KDE employee, can we still request them for services to address learning loss?
Again, another individual situation
Mhm.
we'll have to look at.
Okay. So does that mean that the items will be taken back at the end of this program, 2023? So I think the question is alluding to any purchases made with EANS funds, and I would say no, because you will be continuing to use those funds for the purpose for the original intended purpose.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too.
Okay. What is the procedure for professional development to help teachers address learning loss?
Well, I think professional development would be allowable. I think there's one instance where professional development outside of learning loss would not be allowable, and I believe that is for professional development about the use of professional or personal protective equipment. I believe that type of professional development is not reimbursable, and I don't have the page right up in front of me, but there is on that EANS page a specific statement about professional development that cannot be reimbursed.
Okay. Will contracted KDE employees get benefits?
I would say that, of course, depends on the individual situation as far as what, if they're considered a part-time employee, an interim employee, or something like that. But in most cases, I would say the answer to that is yes.
Okay. Will we be given a list of vendors on master agreement?
I don't know that the plan is to actually supply a list. We could definitely point you to the Finance and Administration Cabinet's website that lists that. I don't know that will be helpful, as it may have a whole different look than what you guys are used to looking at. But Alan and his staff would be able to assist you if you had specific questions.
Okay.
And I'll just kind of reiterate some more off of that. Yes, I can point you in the direction to the Finance Cabinet website so you can see the vendors that are on state master agreement. However, it's not a matter of, okay, they got this part number, that part number, and it's this price or that price. It's more an overview. This vendor is on contract for these types of services. Kind of puts everything in a category. So kind of like what Karen said, I don't know how beneficial that list will be to you.
Okay.
So Thelma, we're about 5 minutes before the hour, so
I don't think they have that many more.
okay,
Okay,
good.
can you help me understand how the benefits will be provided? Will the benefits be the same as our school, or for example, will they have their insurance through the state retirement, etc.?
So if they're KDE employees, then they will be treated as a KDE employee, and that will include their fringe.
Okay. Can you explain how well, this kind of goes back to that same question. Can you explain how the teachers will be paid? I understand they will receive their paycheck from KDE.
Right. I mean, they're gonna,
That-
it just really depends on what the service is, and if we're able to contract with, let's say, an entity to supply that service. It will just really depend on the situation, but they will be paid from KDE.
Okay. So if I want to purchase new technology and furniture, who from the state will communicate with me about my needs? Who communicates with the vendor? So if it's a if it's a procurement request, Alan went over the forms in the beginning of the information that you need to submit to KDE, and the KDE procurement branch will be overseeing in that process and following up with the school if additional information is needed. But the KDE procurement office will be working with the vendor. So that's Alan.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Thelma, can I, this is Kay, let me jump in real quick. I know we're about out of time, but there will be a representative from the Office of Continuous Improvement. David Melante's office will have a representative who is monitoring that mailbox for the initial submission of any request that comes in. Before it even gets to Alan, before it gets to the whole ordering or payment or anything, that request is going to be reviewed for compliance with the amended budget that you submitted. So there may be some back and forth on the front end that you've requested reimbursement and we can't find this on your amended budget. Can you help us out? And we're going to try to get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed before it gets to the procurement or the payment stage. So expect some back and forth, especially the first couple of times with the KDE representative who's monitoring that mailbox, because we want to have everything in pretty good shape before it gets to Alan.
Kay, if I can expand on that just a little bit. Her
Sure.
name is Lisa Crisp, and I'm not sure if she's on here. Her first day was today. She's worked with us before, but I do want to say that the private schools should continue to work with their KDE consultant to get the budgets approved, and that's the person who's already contacted you. They will forward that approved budget to Elise, and then once that's approved, then you get notice. You can begin your requests, and that's when you'll be in contact with Elise.
Okay. The few remaining questions that are in the chat revolves around job descriptions for an interventionist, and then once again, staffing paying for district staff. If you would send your questions to your KDE consultant, and we will follow up accordingly.
Yeah, thanks, Thelma. And we'll try to compile these questions that we've addressed during this webinar and see if we can get together an FAQ from the webinar and post it to our EANS webpage in the next few days, along with the PowerPoint. So in ending, I just really want to tell everyone how much I appreciate you all joining us today, and your patience and understanding as we navigate through these processes that are as foreign to you as they are to us. So we are really working diligently to try to make our transitions and our processes as smooth as possible for you all, so that you can receive the services and the commodities as well as the reimbursements as timely as possible. So as always, appreciate your patience. Questions can go to your individual consultant here at KDE, as well as to the Ombudsman email address. And keep watching the EANS webpage on KDE's website for additional information as we receive it. Again, I appreciate everyone being on today, and thank you to our KDE team for being on, and we will talk to everyone soon. Take care.